All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday night's weekly roundup. It's not going to be much of a roundup. Usually a roundup, I make it rounded, well-rounded with Tanya, Rambam. This week, I'm not going to do that because the main thing this week is Shavuos. And I'm not sure we spoke much about Shavuos. In fact, we have not spoken about Shavuos. I know for a fact. And I must say, I want to mention that the first class I ever gave live via Zoom was 1 year ago. I guess a year and a month ago, because it's a leap year in the Hebrew calendar. A year and a month ago, there to a group of guys from actually people, a community in Indonesia, and it was about Shavuos. They asked me about Shavuos, and that kind of inspired me to be like, well, I think there are other people that would like to maybe hear about Shavuos. And so then I started this little program, which is now called Chabad Academy. So kind of come full circle. And what better topic to talk about than Shavuos, because Shavuos is connected to the learning of Torah. Just to jump right in, Shavuos. What is Shavuos all about? We know the classic question is, Torah was given, in other words, Torah was studied since the times of Adam, and certainly by the times of Noah. We know for a fact. Noah had a yeshiva, Shem. Who studied in that yeshiva? Abraham studied in that yeshiva while Noah was still alive. I don't know, it's not clear if he met Noah. It was 10 generations, right, from Noah to Abraham. Noah lived to be 938. Please check me on that. So he lived to be, they crossed paths for like a good 20 years or something like that. So like around then. Abraham studied in that yeshiva. He taught Isaac. Isaac taught Jacob. Jacob then sent, while his son Joseph was in Egypt, and they became reunited. And Joseph said to his father Jacob and to all the brothers and sisters, "Come on down." And what did Jacob do? It says that Rashi tells us that he sent Levi ahead to set up a yeshiva in Goshen, which was the land where the tribe of Levi lived. Well, where the family of Joseph lived, and then eventually the tribe of Levi lived there. And we know that they studied Torah. Why did he send them ahead? What does it mean he sent Levi ahead? He sent Levi ahead to set up a yeshiva, to study Torah. And that's why the classic question is, it says that Jacob lived the best 17 years of his life in Egypt. How is that possible? He's in exile. He's not living in Israel anymore. Fine, he's reunited, but like, wouldn't it be better if he lived back in Israel? And the answer is because he had a yeshiva there and he was studying Torah. We know that the tribe of Levi studied Torah the entire time during the exile, and they were not subjugated to be slaves, right? That's why Moses and Aaron and Miriam were so free to walk to Pharaoh. Yeah, the Jewish people are slaves. How are they like walking to and fro to Pharaoh? That's because Pharaoh didn't enslave the tribe of Levi, because they had this thing, a little bit off topic, but the Egyptians had this thing that if you were like a priest of any religion, they didn't enslave you. So the tribe of Levi were the Kohanim and the Levites, so they didn't enslave them. Anyway, they had a yeshiva there. They studied Torah. So what exactly, until on the 6th day of Sivan, today is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, first day of Sivan, 6 days later, which was a Shabbos, God gave us the Torah. What was the difference? So the main difference is, the classic difference, is that the Jewish people, what we studied, not just Jewish people, the yeshiva was Jewish wisdom. And they understood spiritual ideas. It wasn't very clear to all of those that studied the Torah, but they knew that there was a concept of like binding things onto your hand and onto your eyes. So they would take sticks. They didn't have like tefillin like we have with black straps and everything like that. They knew about lighting candles and what candles sort of represented on a spiritual level, because they could see, Sarah and Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, they were able to see these things spiritually. But what took place, it was just wisdom. So what took place on Shavuos? The Gezerah, there was a decree that the spiritual world should not descend below into the physical. Lo yardu elyonim letachtonim. The spiritual world should not descend to the physical, and the lo yalu tachtonim leelyonim. And the physical world should not raise itself up to the spiritual world. In other words, there were two separate worlds. There were the godly world, the spiritual world, and then there was the physical world. And God said for the first 2,448 years, they should not combine together. And then God said, now that gezerah, that decree is annulled. It's not now it's time to fuse them together, which I just want to point that things change. Things change. What was inappropriate at one point in time can become appropriate at a different point in time. Some people argue, whoa, what do you mean? Thousands of years ago, we did like this. God could have given the Torah right away, but it wasn't, because things had to be in a certain place. Things change. It says that God, before the Beis Hamikdash, before the temple was built in Jerusalem, God loved bamas. God loved altars set up anywhere. Sacrifices that were given anywhere outside your house. You want to give a sacrifice to God, you could just walk outside and give a sacrifice. We see in the Torah all the time. We're going to come to it. Bilam is going to give sacrifices. Whatever, we're going to see people are going to give sacrifices wherever they're at. But it said God loved it. And then once the temple was built, God said, I hate sacrifices that are given outside the temple. So we see, whatever, things change in the world. So what happened? God did away with the gezerah. He did away with the decree. And now it's not that the spiritual world literally descended, obviously, right? It's not a real descent. When we see descent, what does that mean? It means that things that are more closer to God are considered higher, and things that are more physical, more concrete, are considered lower, meaning they're more insensitive to godliness. So that's higher and lower. What happened I have to sneeze. Okay, it's not coming. What happened on Shavuos was that God revealed the spirituality of the physicality, the spirituality of the physicality, the godliness within the physicality. Because physicality, the material world that we live in, comes from God. Not only it comes from God, it actually comes from God's essence when you really study the deep parts of Chassidus. So it's not like it's not the antithesis, it's not the opposite, it's not like, the Satan of godliness. It's an expression of godliness. So therefore there must be godliness. There must be godliness within it, right? And it became revealed. Where do we see that? So before I get into that, let's talk a little bit outside. I just want to talk about some general details. There's no special mitzvah about Shavuos. Yeah, on Pesach we have matzah and maror. Rosh Hashanah we have the shofar. On Sukkot we have the sukkah, lulav, and the esrog. All of them. Purim we have the Megillah, Hanukkah, the menorah. Shavuos, okay, we have cheesecake, and we eat dairy, which we'll talk about in a second. Why? We have you hear the Ten Commandments. And whatever. There's no mitzvah though. Not only is there not a mitzvah from the Torah, there's no mitzvah from the rabbis. These are all customs.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
What about the Shtei HaLechem?
The Shtei HaLechem.
Because doesn't that take place on Shavuot?
Yeah, but okay. You're right, but I don't think it's not a mitzvah it doesn't seem to be a mitzvah that's connected to Shavuos. In other words, it's not like the mitzvah of Shavuos. It's what has to do with the time period. I have to look into it, but it's all accepted opinion. This is not like my own opinion. In the Gemara, it talks about there's no mitzvah specific for Shavuos. That's like
okay.
Meaning that expresses the holiday. That's kind of
like it doesn't have anything to do with Matan Torah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it seems so. Correct.
Okay.
Now I'm sure we'll be able to find some connections, but it seems to be the general since the history, the general opinion is that there is no mitzvah that's connected specifically to Shavuos. And the reason there isn't is because Shavuos is the one that gave us all of the mitzvahs. It is the essence of all of the mitzvahs. It is beyond a mitzvah. Just an interesting fact, Shavuos, yes, we have a Rav in our community. Yeah, the rabbi. He's a Rav in our community. Now, in Chabad, we have a general rule. There's a rule that you don't leave your community. There's really no reason to ever leave your community because there's always questions that could come up, and it's improper. It's not just Chabad. It's everywhere. Any Rav of a town never left their community, except one time of the year they would leave their community if they wanted to leave the community, and that was on Shavuos. Because there's no halacha that we're not already aware of, because we just had Pesach 49 days ago, and we have Shabbos. We're already familiar with the laws of like a Yom Tiv. We're familiar with the laws of Shabbos. Not much is going to happen within 2 days, that you can't pretty much get together and figure out. So this would be the only time of the year that a Rav would leave his town and go visit another town or his teacher, his Rebbe, whatever it was. It was the only time of year. It says in the Gemara that the Torah, that Shavuos has a special connection to Mashiach. It says that when God gave us the Torah and held the mountain over our heads, it's like a chuppah. It's like a chuppah, which is kiddushin, which is there are 2 steps, maybe 3, but for sure 2 steps to marriage. There's kedusha and nusuyin. Kiddushin and Nisuyin. So Kiddushin is when you separate, you designate that my wife is for me and for nobody else, so to speak. She's exclusive. Kiddusha, which is considered holy. Yeah, the translation in English is holy. Holy, it means separated. You're separated from everybody else. But then there's the consecration. There's the Nisuyin. And it says that the chuppah took place on Shavuos. That's when God separated us from the rest of the nations. And then the actual marriage, the consecration of the marriage, will take place when the Mashiach comes. There are 2 special souls, especially in the Chabad world, in the Hasidic world, 2 souls that that passed their yard sites are on Shavuos, with David HaMelech, King David, and the Baal Shem Tov. And King David has an obvious connection to Mashiach, as we know. The Mashiach will come from King David. He is the tribe. His tribe, the tribe of Yehuda, has all the kings, and the tribe Mashiach will come from King David. Now I'm really going to sneeze. Excuse me. And Mashiach, and the Baal Shem Tov has a clear connection with Mashiach, because there's a famous story that the Baal Shem Tov went up to Shemayim, went up to the chamber of Mashiach and said, "Emasai Kosimar, when are you coming? Emasai. When? Kosimar, are you coming, my master?" He asked Mashiach, "When are you coming?" Mashiach answered him, "When your well springs will spring forth to the outside. When your well springs, the well springs of your teachings, will spring forth to the outside," meaning the teachings, the inner aspects of the Torah will become accessible to everybody, to the outside, not just those in the inner circle, but to the outer circle, so to speak, to those that are outside, unfamiliar, insensitive to these deeper aspects of the Torah, which is hopefully what I'm imparting to you and that I try to inject in myself every single day. That's when Mashiach comes, when it'll spread forth. And that, it doesn't just mean that like a wellspring, like a spring, the water flows out and the water will trickle and make its way. It flows out and eventually it'll reach all the places of the world. No, that's not what it means. It means that every place of the world will become itself a wellspring. That the wellspring, the actual wellspring itself, will be everywhere. So that's just my charge to you, my mission to you, that it's not enough just to take the information, but to pass it on to somebody else, to teach the information. And that fulfills the mission that Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov. Okay. Question is, why do we study Torah? So we got the Torah. I'll get into the more mystical aspects. I'll go back to that in a moment. Why do we study Torah? So there's 3 reasons that are usually given why we study Torah. Number 1, to know exactly what to do. We don't know how to do the mitzvahs. To do a mitzvah, you have to learn about it. Torah itself, the Rebbe would say, means hayra, a teaching. What does it teach us? It teaches us how to do mitzvahs. Now, the question is, are women obligated in the study of Torah? So if this is like a bit of a Gemara back and forth over here. If studying Torah is just about knowing which mitzvahs to do, so you can argue that women maybe don't have the obligation to study Torah. Or maybe just a little bit, but certainly not the entire Torah, because most of the Torah is not really pertinent to women, as well as even to me. I'm a regular Jew, a regular Yisrael. Most mitzvahs have to do with the Beis Hamikdash, with the temple, with a Kohen, with a Levi. So we don't have a mitzvah really, you might say we don't have a mitzvah to study the whole Torah, just the parts that are pertinent to us. So the question is that true? Let me just see 1 second. So then you might say like this. Then you might say, the Medrash says, you might think that there's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to just study Torah for the sake of studying Torah. So what does it say? So if there's a mitzvah to study just a little bit of Torah, but the same Torah that says you have a mitzvah to study Torah, it says when you're preoccupied with something else, you're putter. You don't have to study Torah. And it says that women have an obligation of the home, and a home is like a lot to deal with to run a proper home. A home doesn't just mean the house, to like sweep the floor. It's about the atmosphere of a person's life, of her family's life. She injects the atmosphere, the life, the energy into the family, into the children, into the husband. Obviously, there's a bit of a symbiotic relationship going on. They have to, they have to cycle through. But the woman creates the atmosphere, the love, the passion for all good things. So therefore, she's very busy. In order to do that, requires tremendous effort. So therefore, she might not have an obligation to study Torah the entire day. So says the Torah, there's a third reason to study Torah, which is the real reason we study the Torah. Hashem said in the opening line of the 10 Commandments, what's the word? Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem, your God. Now the word Anochi, first of all, is an Egyptian word. It's not a Hebrew word. And I'll explain why in a moment. Why is it an Egyptian word? It's done by design. But the Gemara tells us that Anochi is an acronym, which literally means I, but it's an acronym for Ana, Nafshi, Ksavis, Yahavis. I put my essence into my writings, which is saying, God is saying, my essence is in this Torah. You want to grasp the essence of who I am? Study the Torah. You want to connect with me, which is really what it's about, the connection, study the Torah. And really studying Torah, the whole point of giving the Torah was to connect ourselves to God. That's what this whole thing is all about. It's a relationship. I'm trying to connect myself to God, and there's ups and there's downs. I have obligations. He has obligations. You have different emotions, different needs and different wants, and there's love and there's passion and there's hatred. There's hatred and there's like disappointment and all these different things. And God, it's all about the connection. And therefore, if you want to connect with God, everybody has an obligation to connect with God. Everybody. So even women. So therefore, women have an obligation to study Torah. However, not everyone really accepts. It's a very Hasidic approach. And in fact, I'll tell you something. When a baby boy is born, there is a classic saying. What's the greeting, or what do we wish that baby boy? Tigalu l'chupa l'mais chupa. Wait, tigalu l'chupa. Tigalu l'chupa. No, I can't believe that. Chupa. No, chupa. Guys, I say it every Shabbos. L'toira l'chupa u'lamaisim tovim. He should grow to Torah, to learn Torah, to chuppah, to marriage, umaisim tovim, and good deeds, which means mitzvahs. He should grow to Torah, to get married, and to have good deeds, which could also mean children, or it doesn't necessarily mean children itself, but it means to raise, to influence people, to raise them up, to make them into who they're meant to be. Chabad says that by both men, by boys and girls. No, I don't think, it's very rare to find in another circle what they typically say about a girl is chuppah ul maisim tovim. She should grow to chuppah and to maisim tovim. Chabad adds Torah chuppah ul maisim tovim. And the Rebbe would often say, especially in the beginning years, when he would sign off a letter that said she should grow to Torah chuppah maisim tovim. When he sent a letter to someone congratulating them on having a girl, he would explain, why do I add Torah, which is uncommon to say about a girl? Because number one, she could have an obligation to study Torah because it's about connection to God. And another way, a more simple way of understanding it, the more straightforward, is that she's a partnership with her husband. That if she allows him to study Torah, yeah, she has to make a sacrifice in order for him to study Torah. And so therefore she's a partner in the study of Torah, and she gets half of the reward, so to speak, whatever that means, the reward for studying Torah. That's also why people want to know, there's always like this, for boys when they're born, there's like all these parties, and one of them that people have a big complaint about is the Shalom Zachor. Yeah, the first Shabbos that the boy is born, we have a Shalom Zachor, which literally means hello boy. You give shalom, you give hello, you give greetings to the boy. And the main reason is because the neshama just came into this world and it needs a certain comfort. It just came basking in the rays. It was basking in the rays of Hashem, and now it's in this physical world that hides over Hashem. So we give it like peace by giving it shalom. Yeah, speaking it. But the question is, why doesn't a girl have it? And the answer is because half of her neshama is together with the boy. So when he gets it, she's also getting it at the same time, wherever she is in the world. Sometimes she's still in the Olam Es Elyonim, or she's in a different part of the world. She could be older, but she feels that peace then, because they share. First of all, they're one neshama, they're one soul that came into two different bodies. But we see this partnership. A lot of women still don't like that. They don't like that explanation. I didn't make it up. Anyway, so the Torah was given on the 6th of Sivan. But what happened on the 5th of Sivan? The 5th day of Sivan, we said the most famous lines, Na'aseh v'nishma. God said, do you accept this Torah? And we said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do the Torah, and then we will listen, and then we will understand. Which is the concept of Kabbalah's Ol. We took the yoke of heaven. We accepted the mitzvot, without even understanding what they were all about. Someone came to Rava, I don't know, like a Roman intellectual came to Rava and said, look at the Roman, Rava was a little bit later. Okay, somebody came to Rava in the Gemara. Somebody came to Rava and said, you're so impulsive. You're such an impulsive people. You accepted the Torah without looking inside. And Rava said, yeah, that's a compliment. So if you're impulsive, don't worry, it's pretty good. Okay. Oh, I just want to mention one more thing over here. Even though it says Na'aseh v'nishma, we said that we will do and we will listen. And when we said we will do and we will listen, in other words, we will do the mitzvahs and then understand them, God gave us 2 crowns. In other words, God had a tremendous pleasure from us being with such alacrity, accepting the Torah with such alacrity. What people forget is that even though we said we will do and then we will listen, they focus on the we will do before we even understand. But we also have to do the we will listen, the studying of Torah. God was proud. God was happy, one, for saying we'll do it, and because it's all about doing it, but also God gave us a crown for studying it. The way to describe how do we study it, why do we study it? So the answer is because we're trying to get the ta'amim, the reasoning behind the Torah. In other words, we got the mitzvahs. You can tell me what to do. Put on tefillah and say kiddush, yada yada yada. But then we want to know what God wants us to know is the ta'amim. Ta'amim means reasons. But ta'amim is also another word in Hebrew, which means the flavor, the taste, the enjoyment. God doesn't want us to be robots. We're not like, just tell me what to do and I'll turn off my brain and I'll do it. There is a time for that. But that is not a way to live life. There has to be trying to understand it, the depth of it, appreciate it, because that's how you become closer to God. The more I understand you, the more I love you. The word love itself comes from the word hov, which means to give myself over, meaning there has to be a give and take on both sides. That's usually how it's explained. I have to understand you, appreciate you. And the more usually love comes later, because I see you in different situations. I see how you react in different places. I get to know the backstory, so to speak, and you begin to appreciate the person, you begin to love the person. So the reasons I love you become the taste and the pleasure of why we serve God. Now, why did God start with the words Anochi? That's the opening line. Anochi, which is an Egyptian word. Because God was teaching us that what is the point of me giving you the Torah? Sure, it's for me to connect with you. That is the truth. But I want to connect with you where you are. It says Hashem wants a dwelling place. In other words, he wants to feel comfortable. He wants to feel comfortable. He wants to feel himself b'tachtainim, in the lowest realms. What's the lowest realms? The most physical, material, concrete, insensitive parts of the world. God says, I want to feel comfortable there. I want to be exactly how I am in the most sublime parts. That's how I want to feel in the least sublime part, so to speak. In other words, reveal the depths that I am there too. We should reveal that I'm there too, that even in the darkness, whatever traumas, trials, tribulations that we've gone to, those are catalysts to express godliness. Everything we have, people, classic thing, the very famous chapter in Igeros HaTshuva, in one of the parts of the Tanya, which is the fourth part of the Tanya, the fourth part of the Tanya is a very famous letter from the Alter Rebbe that people were complaining about tirdas haparnasa, that I can't make a living. And they were giving other complaints, health, living, the typical things that we all pray for, that we don't have to deal with. Rightfully so, we do want to pray for such things, that we don't have to deal with those things. But the Alter Rebbe goes on and on saying, God is doing this for you to come closer to him. Whatever he puts in your way, in my way, is for me to then find a way to come closer to him. In other words, it's set up that way. A person has trouble with money. That's because at that point in time, you'll be closer to God with less money at that point in time. Whatever you want to do, money, I don't know, obviously more money, more problems, perhaps. God is saying that I want to feel in the lowest realms. I want to be on your level. I want you to express me on your level wherever you are. So this Egyptian, the Egypt was considered the most decadent country, the lowest of the low. And God says, there, my essence is there as well. There's no place void of my essence. This was the big argument, if you want to know, between Hasidus, the Hasidic movement, and the what we call the Hisnagdisha movement, the people, the opponents. Because if you would ask the opponents, so to speak, those that didn't learn Hasidus, is God in the bathroom? They would say, of course not. God is not in the bathroom. God is everywhere except for the bathroom. Now, that sounds ridiculous. Now, that's because Hasidus had a tremendous effect upon the world. They saw the truth of it. But at the time, they said, God is not in the bathroom. It's a place of filth. We can't say any words of Torah. So God is obviously not there. And Hasidus says, of course God is there. God, the same God that says, you say words of Torah in the shul, don't say words of Torah in the bathroom. But it's the same God saying the same thing. One of my favorite lines. It says when God spoke, the opening lines of the Ten Commandments, it says, "A kol gadol shelo yasaf." It was a great voice that had no end. Now, one of the way that people knew that, it seems, one of the way that 3 million people knew that it was really God speaking, it's because there was multiple things. Number one, when there was a shofar blast that kept getting louder and louder. Now, usually after 30 seconds, it'll get a little quieter because the person's running out of breath. But for 2 minutes, it just kept getting louder and louder. So they knew that something mysterious was going on over here. It wasn't just a regular person that was blowing the shofar. Other things, God actually said all of the 10 commandments in one sentence, which we cannot fathom. We don't understand what does that even mean. Maybe it was only the first two passages in one sentence, in one breath. Yeah, okay. But it says, Kol Gadol Shel Yasaf. Rashi explains that it was a great voice that had no echo. What is an echo? What is that all about? An echo, what is an echo? An echo is when sound travels. Excuse me. Sound travels and it hits a barrier and it bounces back. Really, there should have been an echo where God was giving us the Torah. But the Torah was telling us that the words that God spoke were of such truth, it penetrated everything. So there was no barrier, there was no resistance. It was absorbed into everything. And this was the pipeline, the tzinor aristeo. This was the pipeline through which God was infusing the material with the spiritual, so to speak. That now there was a mixture, everything was mixed in, that the physical and the spiritual and our job was being mixed in, was being absorbed. The essence was being, another way of explaining is the essence was being revealed, was inside everything physical. There was no resistance, there was no barrier. The barrier was broken, so to speak. Okay. There's a famous medrash. This is one of my favorite midrashim. So God, I'm sure you've heard it before. So God gave Moses the Torah, and he'll eventually teach it to us. But for 40 days and 40 nights, Moses is up on top of the mountain. He's being sustained by Torah. He's physically being sustained by Torah. And so for 40 days and 40 nights, God teaches him the Torah. So what do you think happened? God divided the Torah up into 40 parts, and each day, God taught him a new part of the Torah. But that's not what happened. The Medrash tells us that God taught Moses the entire Torah on day one. And then at night, Moses forgot it. And so it happened on day two. Learned the entire Torah and then he forgot it. And this happened for 40 days. Moses would learn the entire Torah and then forget it. The question is, the Medrash asks, Moses studied the Torah in Egypt. What do you mean he was forgetting the Torah? He studied the Torah already. He already knew probably most of the Torah. What does it mean he forgot it? Because Torah now was on a whole different level. It wasn't until the 40th day Moses complained and said, God, I cannot grasp this Torah. And then God said, I will give it to you as a gift, because that's the only way you're going to get it, is if I give it to you as a gift, as a matana, as a gift. That's why it's called Matan Torah, the gift of Torah. Shavuos is called Matan Torah, Matan Torah Seinu. It was a gift because God said that what you were learning before was only wisdom, but it wasn't my essence. And the essence you can't intellectually grasp, you can't intellectually appreciate. I have to give that to you. The ability to be able to do that, I have to give it to you. It's a gift that I'm bestowing upon you. So it's a gift of Torah. Just a couple other Talmuds that I appreciate, that I think about every year of Shavuos. There's a very famous Talmud that says that Hillel mechayiv aniyim l'Talmud Torah. Says that Hillel Zaken, Hillel the sage, he obligates poor people to study Torah. And then it says Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi mechayiv ashirim l'Talmud Torah. It says Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi obligates the very wealthy to study Torah. And it goes on and lists a few different people. Rabbi Akiva, I believe, mechayiv, the ignoramus to study Torah. What's this all about? Hillel was a destitute man. He was very poor. He didn't even have money to pay the minimal tuition to get into yeshiva. He had to chop wood during the day, and he would give a little bit to his wife to be able to survive. Then he'd give the rest to the yeshiva to be able to study. He was very, very poor. What happens is we go up to heaven. Yeah, hopefully, maybe Mashiach will come before then. We want to do it. But we go, after 120 years, we go to heaven. And one of the questions they ask, there's a whole list of questions they ask us. And one of the questions they ask is, did you study Torah? So in walks a poor man, and he says, look, I would have studied Torah, but I was poor. I had to try to make a living. I spent all my time. God set it up in a way that I was always struggling from here to there, trying to make a buck. I didn't have time to study Torah. And they said, fine. And they brought Hillel. And they said, Hillel had a chance to study. Hillel made it. Hillel studied Torah. And I said, that's no excuse. Hillel was, he was poor. And he found time to study Torah. So not a good explanation. Then they bring in a very wealthy man. A very, very wealthy man comes up to heaven. And they said, did you study Torah? Did you have time? Did you study Torah every day? He said, I would have, but I had business meetings and I was part of, I was giving a lot of tzedakah. I was always going to these dinners. I was going to foundations and I was always giving and giving. People were always coming. And I saw everybody. You know what? I saw everybody. I made sure to make time for everybody and give them money. I didn't really have time to study Torah for myself. And they brought in Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the author of the Mishnah, he really financed the Mishnah, was wealthier than the Caesar in Rome. That's what it says. He had delicacies at his table from all year round. Yeah, he had fruits and vegetables from all year round. Extremely wealthy at the time, you can imagine. They brought him and they said, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had so much. Look, he managed. He was wealthier than you, and he managed to study Torah. That's not an excuse. The Rebbe asks, okay, if they say they didn't have time to study Torah, they didn't have time to study Torah. Like I can imagine a guy who's like really trying to make it. He's working really, really hard to make a buck, or someone who's the opposite, very wealthy, or someone who was ignorant. They brought Rabbi Kiva, someone who was very ignorant. He didn't know. He couldn't. He didn't. It was too much. It was too much anxiety, too much stress. He didn't think about. He had to make a living. The Rebbe asks, so what's the question over here? Why are we being so harsh and difficult on these people? And what the Talmud is teaching us is that it says it 2 times in the Talmud, this concept that I'm about to say. There's always room for dessert. Yeah, you ever really full at a restaurant or at home? I mean, it happens to me all the time. Every Shabbos. I'm very full. I'm so full I can't have any more kugel. Please, get the challah away from me. And then my wife brings out peanut butter pie, which I love. I can eat like half the peanut butter pie. The Gemara says there's always room for dessert. In other words, if something is very pleasurable to you, don't make time for it. No matter what, no matter how full your schedule is, no matter how full your belly is, Elia, you'll always make food, you'll always make room, you always make time for whatever's very pleasurable. So it says, what were they doing when they came up to heaven? They brought the different sages, saying these people were in the exact same situation, not even worse than you. These Hillel was the poorest of the poor. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was the wealthiest of the wealthiest. You had no idea what was on his plate, and yet he still found time to author the entire Mishnah. And Hillel still had time to basically run an entire nation. Don't give me. You just didn't make. You didn't find the pleasure in it. You didn't put the effort in to find the pleasure and the enjoyment. That's the problem. You didn't make. You have to find the enjoyment. You got to build like a geschmack. It's an acquired taste, but you have to find it. I'm not really sure we have much time. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. Anybody have any questions?
No questions, but I do notice that in every letter that Rebbe wrote back as a response to whoever wrote to him some letters with questions and confusion regarding Torah life and everything else. So he always encouraged, even for women, study Torah all the time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one of the ultimate message of the Rebbe to all women who came to him with questions.
The Rebbe also didn't just do that. What was unique about also, not only that, first of all, the Rebbe would say you have to learn halacha because you have to run a home.
Right.
My wife knows just as much kosher as I do in the home. But the Rebbe also said you should get out of the house. And you should meaning get people in your house, teach them Torah, invite them. Yeah, you got to be like a community activist.
Right.
Rebbe said we don't do that. We're not like that anymore. Yeah, this where we just sit at the home and we do nothing. The Rebbe's like that was the old generation. We don't do that anymore. The Rebbe was like the Rebbe spoke about it during the feminist movement. The Rebbe was like very much liked the feminist movement. Thought it was fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, to your point, yes. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maytar, good to see you. Welcome. Oh, my father's on as well. I'm not sure if he's listening, but just kidding. Okay.
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Am I?
I'm just joking. I'm joking. Yeah.
Can you repeat the meaning of the acronym for
Yeah.
Anochi?
Anochi is Ana, I, Nafshi, my soul, Kisavis, I wrote Yehavis in it or to it. My soul I wrote into it, meaning the Torah.
So you're saying basically is I put my essence in it, is what you said?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I retained it, but once you mentioned that peanut butter pie, I just lost everything.
Yeah. My wife is making it right now, I think. So.
Never had it. Doesn't
Maybe
sound
that-
appealing.
You're all
I'm sorry.
welcome
That's why
to-
Moshe forgot the
You're all
Torah.
welcome to West Bloomfield, Michigan for Shabbos. Please come, everybody. You're all welcome to come and try it. Absolutely.
You never gave it to me either.
We don't save the best for you. We give you like healthy stuff, whatever. You never had the peanut butter pie? You've had the peanut butter pie.
No, never.
You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you did. Whatever. No, maybe you didn't. I can't. Okay. I have it all the time.
Maybe Moshe forgot the Torah every night because of the peanut butter pie.
Oh, I just want to mention, thank you, Aristeo. Not really what you were saying. Why do we have dairy? Because
Right.
we converted at Mount Sinai. There was no Jew. There was no Jew before Mount Sinai. We came from Abraham. We were just one family, and then we became a tribe. But there was a Jew did not exist because the Torah tells us what a Jew is. How does a Jew act? So until the Torah was given and the world became infused with the Elokus, the spirituality, there was no such thing as a Jew. So we converted. We had a conversion on every Jew is a convert on at Mount Sinai. You guys know the dating app Saw You at Sinai? We were all there. Every soul was at Sinai. That's what it means. I saw you at Sinai. Every soul was there. We were all part of the 600,000 souls that were there. I know there were 3 million, but it's whatever. This is very Kabbalistic. I'm not going to get too much into it. We all converted. And since we converted, that means all of the pots and pans that we had used previously, the day before, were cooked by a non-Jew. And all the food that we had, all of the meat that we slaughtered was slaughtered by a non-Jew. And we don't eat meat that's slaughtered by a non-Jew, even though it was Rabbi Puchnik, who's very holy. Yesterday he wasn't Jewish, so we don't. But today he is. So we didn't have time to slaughter any meats and kosher our pots. We had to get new pots and pans. So what did we do? We just milked the cows, and we didn't look. Oh, we also didn't know the laws of shechita. We didn't know the laws of slaughtering. Moses had to teach it to us. So since we didn't know the laws, we didn't do any shechita. We didn't do any slaughtering. We didn't do any koshering. So we cooked milk. We had cheese. We had a lot of milk. So that's why, to remember, we have that. Another thing is we also stay up the entire night. Shavuos, here we have an all-night study learning session. We stay up all night because the Jewish people it was a mistake that we made. I say we because we were there. We went to sleep the night before the giving of the Torah. Obvious question is the most exciting thing. We'd been counting down for 49 days to get the Torah. How could we sleep? The short answer is sleep. We know the soul leaves the body. A part of the soul leaves the body and ascends on high. And it's the most sublime, elevated activity we could possibly do. So we thought. So we thought that in order for us to really appreciate and receive the Torah properly, we have to be our most elevated self, our most spiritual self. So we went to sleep as like a sort of preparation. But God said, no, we don't. Sleep is not, even though, yes, there is a concept of your soul does elevate. I need you here in this world. I need you excited in a physical body to study Torah, to be a Jew. I need you to be excited in this world, alive, awake. So we felt kind of bad. So ever since then, every single night we have every year we have the custom to stay awake the entire night to sort of rectify that sin, so to speak. So we spend the entire night studying Torah. A lot more, but there's just too much. There's too much in the Torah for me to tell you everything. I will with time. I'll tell you everything. Okay, I gotta go.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes. Okay, we say we should makabel the Torah b'simcha upanimius. You should receive the Torah. We know the Torah is being given every single year. And we should be makabel. We should receive the Torah b'simcha, with joy, upanimius, and it should be relevant. Torah should be relevant.
Amen.
Nochi is about
Amen.
being relevant. Everything's about it should be relevant in our lives. Chaim l'chaim. See you guys. Good
L'chaim.
night. I'll
Chodesh
see you
Tov,
soon.
Rabbi.
Chodesh
L'chaim.
Tov. Yeah, Chodesh Tov. That's right.
Rosh Chodesh Tov.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Oh, see you then.